The old prospector had been wandering these unforgiving mountains for what felt like a lifetime, his weathered hands bearing the scars of countless encounters with unforgiving rock and stubborn earth. Samuel Sam Hartwell was his name, though he hadn't spoken it aloud in so many months that sometimes he wondered if he'd forgotten how his own voice sounded when forming those familiar syllables. The echo of his pickaxe against stone had become his only companion, a rhythmic percussion that marked the passage of days in this wilderness where time seemed to move differently, where the sun rose and set without witness save for the occasional eagle circling overhead. His campfire crackled in the darkness, sending sparks dancing towards stars that seemed close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. Sam had grown accustomed to talking to the flames, sharing his thoughts with the only listener that never judged, never interrupted, never left him behind. The fire had heard his stories of the gold rush days, of the woman he'd left behind in Sacramento, of dreams that had led him deeper and deeper into these remote peaks where civilization was nothing more than a distant memory. Before we continue with Sam's extraordinary tale, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Your support means the world to us, and we love connecting with fellow story enthusiasts from around the globe. Tonight felt different somehow, though Sam couldn't quite put his finger on why. The usual sounds of the wilderness, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the whisper of wind through pine needles, seemed muted, as if the very mountains were holding their breath. He'd been working a promising vein of quartz all day, his hopes rising with each glint of gold that caught the afternoon light. But now, as darkness settled around his small camp like a familiar blanket, a strange sense of anticipation filled the air. Sam stirred the fire with a long stick, watching the flames leap higher, casting dancing shadows on the rocky walls that surrounded his makeshift home. He'd built his shelter in a natural alcove, protected from the worst of the mountain weather, with a clear view of the narrow trail that wound down toward the valley far below. In all his years in these mountains, he'd never seen another soul venture this high, this far from the beaten paths that most prospectors followed. The silence was so complete that when the first soft footstep reached his ears, Sam thought perhaps his mind was playing tricks on him. Months of solitude could do strange things to a man's perception, he knew. He'd heard phantom voices before, seen shapes in the shadows that turned out to be nothing more than wind-blown branches or oddly shaped rocks. But this sound was different, deliberate, purposeful, unmistakably human. Sam's hand instinctively moved toward the rifle that lay within easy reach beside his bedroll, but something made him pause. There was no menace in the approaching footsteps, no attempt at stealth or concealment. Whoever was coming seemed to want him to know of their presence, seemed to be announcing themselves in the most peaceful way possible. His heart hammered against his ribs as 8 figures emerged from the darkness beyond his fire's reach, moving with a grace that seemed almost supernatural in the flickering light. They were Apache women, young and beautiful, their ages appearing to range from 18 to perhaps 20 years. Their long black hair caught the firelight like silk, and their dark eyes reflected the flames with an intensity that took Sam's breath away. They wore traditional dress, soft buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork that told stories Sam couldn't read, but somehow understood, spoke of heritage, of connection to this land that ran deeper than his own brief presence here. Without a word, without any sign of aggression or fear, the 8 women arranged themselves in a perfect circle around his fire. They moved with such fluid coordination that Sam wondered if they'd rehearsed this moment, if they'd planned this encounter with the precision of a military operation. Yet there was nothing cold or calculated about their presence. Instead, they radiated a warmth that seemed to complement the heat of the flames between them. Sam found himself frozen, his hand still hovering near his rifle, but making no move to grasp it. These women posed no threat. That much was immediately clear. But their purpose, their reason for appearing out of the wilderness like spirits made flesh, remained a mystery that hung in the air as thick as the smoke from his fire. The crackling of burning wood was the only sound that broke the profound silence, a percussion that seemed to mark time in a moment that felt suspended between reality and dream. For 30 long minutes, they sat in this strange tableau, 8 pairs of dark eyes fixed on the weathered face of the old prospector who had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. Sam felt their gazes like physical things, warm and searching, as if they were reading the story of his life, written in the lines around his eyes, in the silver of his beard, in the calluses on his hands that spoke of years spent wrestling gold from reluctant stone. The tension was palpable, yet it wasn't the kind of tension that preceded violence or conflict. Instead, it was the tension of anticipation, of something momentous about to unfold. Sam found himself studying each face in turn, noting the subtle differences that made each woman unique despite their shared heritage and purpose. There was intelligence in their eyes and something else, a kind of ancient wisdom that made him feel like a child despite his 60-odd years. When one of the women finally rose, her movement was so fluid and graceful that it seemed like a dance. She was perhaps the most striking of the group, with high cheekbones that caught the firelight and eyes that seemed to hold depths Sam couldn't fathom. When she spoke, her English was clear and precise, though accented with the musical cadences of her native tongue. "We have come with a purpose, old man," she said, her voice carrying easily across the small space that separated them. "We seek something from you that goes beyond the gold you dig from these mountains. We have watched you, seen your skill with the rifle, witnessed your ability to survive alone in places where other men would perish. In our tradition, the greatest marksmen are the white men, and we believe this to be true because we have seen it with our own eyes." Sam's mind reeled as he tried to process her words, tried to understand what these beautiful young women could possibly want from a worn-out old prospector who hadn't seen another human being in months. The woman continued, her gaze never wavering from his face, her words measured and deliberate. "We wish to become mothers," she said simply, and the words hung in the air like smoke. But not just any mothers. We wish to bear children who carry the blood of a strong warrior, a man who knows the way of the gun, who can place his shot where he wills it. We believe that such skill, such strength, can be passed from father to son, and we want our children to possess this gift. The implications of her words slowly sank into Sam's consciousness, like water seeping into dry earth. These women weren't here by accident, weren't lost travelers who had stumbled upon his camp. They had come with intention, with purpose, seeking something from him that he had never imagined anyone would want. The silence stretched between them as Sam struggled to find words, to formulate a response to a request that defied everything he thought he knew about the world. The fire continued to crackle and dance, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the faces of the 9 people gathered around it. In that moment, Sam realized that his life of solitude, his years of isolation in these remote mountains, had been leading to this encounter, this moment when the boundaries between cultures, between worlds, would blur in ways he never could have anticipated. The woman who had spoken remained standing, her 7 companions still seated in their perfect circle, all of them waiting for his response to a proposition that would change everything he thought he knew about his purpose in these mountains. The night air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called out across the vast wilderness that had brought them all together in this impossible moment. Sam's weathered hands trembled slightly as he set down the stick he'd been using to tend the fire. The woman's words echoed in his mind, each syllable carrying weight that seemed to press down on his shoulders like the burden of destiny itself. He had come to these mountains seeking gold, seeking fortune, seeking perhaps some meaning in the twilight years of a life that had been marked more by disappointment than triumph. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that he might be sought out for something far more precious than any metal that could be pulled from the earth. "You speak of children," Sam said finally, his voice rusty from disuse but growing stronger with each word. "You speak of passing on skills, of creating warriors, but I am an old man worn down by years of hard living and harder choices. What makes you think that I have anything of value to offer your people?" The woman smiled then, and it was like watching the sun rise over the mountain peaks. "Age brings wisdom, and wisdom guided by skill is the greatest gift a father can give to his children. We have watched you hunt, seen you bring down elk at distances that would challenge men half your age. We have seen you defend your camp from bears and mountain lions with a calm precision that speaks of a warrior's heart. This is what we seek, not just the ability to shoot straight, but the courage and wisdom that guides the hand that holds the weapon." Her words stirred something deep within Sam's chest, something he had thought long dead. For so many years he had seen himself as nothing more than a failure, a man who had chased dreams into the wilderness only to find himself alone and forgotten. But these women saw something different when they looked at him. They saw value, purpose, a legacy worth preserving and passing on to the next generation. The other women began to speak then, each in turn, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to resonate with the very stones around them. They spoke of their tribe's traditions, of the importance of strong children who could protect their people in the changing world that pressed in on all sides. They spoke of prophecies and dreams that had led them to this remote place, to this moment when the paths of two very different peoples would converge in ways that honored both their traditions and their hopes for the future. As the night deepened around them, Sam found himself drawn into their stories, their explanations of customs and beliefs that were foreign to him, yet somehow familiar in their emphasis on family, on legacy, on the importance of preparing the next generation for the challenges that lay ahead. These women weren't asking for something casual or temporary. They were proposing a sacred trust, a responsibility that would bind him to their people in ways that went far beyond the physical act of conception. The fire burned lower as they talked, and one of the women rose to add more wood to the flames. The light danced across her face as she worked, and Sam was struck again by the beauty and dignity of these unexpected visitors. They had traveled far to reach him, had risked much to make this proposal, and their courage in approaching a stranger in the wilderness spoke to a determination that commanded his respect. "There is more," the first woman said, as the fire blazed higher once again. "We do not ask this thing lightly, nor do we offer it without understanding the weight of what we propose. If you agree to help us, you will not be forgotten by our people. Your children will know their father's name, will be taught to honor the man who gave them life and the skills that will serve them well. You will have a place among us for as long as you wish it, a home where your knowledge and experience will be valued and your wisdom sought." The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge spanning two worlds. Sam had spent so many years alone, so many nights talking to the fire and the stars, that the prospect of belonging somewhere, of being valued and remembered, seemed almost too good to be true. Yet as he looked around the circle at these 8 remarkable women, he saw sincerity in their eyes, a genuine desire to create something meaningful from this unlikely encounter. The mountains around them seemed to lean in closer, as if the very landscape was listening to this conversation that would shape the future in ways none of them could fully comprehend. The wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying with it the scent of snow from the higher peaks and the promise of seasons yet to come. In this moment, suspended between his solitary past and an uncertain but no longer lonely future, Sam felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders like a mantle of responsibility he had never expected to wear. The woman who had first spoken extended her hand toward him, palm up, in a gesture that seemed to encompass invitation, respect, and hope all at once. "What say you, Samuel Hartwell? Will you help us bring strong children into this world? Will you become part of something larger than the gold you seek in these stones?" The fact that she knew his name shouldn't have surprised him. If they had been watching him as closely as they claimed, they would have heard him speak it to the fire on those long, lonely nights when the silence became too much to bear. But hearing his name spoken aloud by another human being after so many months of solitude struck him with unexpected force, reminding him that he was more than just a forgotten old man scratching at rocks in the wilderness. Sam looked around the circle one more time, meeting each pair of eyes in turn, seeing in them reflections of hope, determination, and a kind of faith that humbled him. These women had traveled far and risked much based on their belief that he had something valuable to offer their future children. The least he could do was give their proposal the serious consideration it deserved. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling up toward the star-filled sky, and in that moment, Sam realized that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The gold he had been seeking in these mountains paled in comparison to the treasure that had just walked into his camp, the chance to matter, to contribute something meaningful to the world, to leave a legacy that would outlast any fortune he might dig from the earth. As the night deepened around them and the fire burned steady and bright, Sam Hartwell prepared to give his answer to a question that would transform not just his own future, but the futures of generations yet unborn. The mountains stood silent, witness to this moment when destiny revealed itself wearing the faces of 8 Apache women who had seen in a lonely old prospector the father of warriors yet to come. The weight of their request settled into Sam's bones like the mountain cold, but it was a weight he found himself willing to bear. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly needed, truly part of something greater than his own solitary existence. The gold could wait. This was a different kind of treasure entirely, one that promised riches beyond anything he had ever dreamed of finding in these remote and beautiful mountains. Sam's weathered hands moved slowly as he reached for the coffee pot that sat near the edge of the fire, his movements deliberate and thoughtful as he processed the magnitude of what these women were asking of him. The metal was warm against his palms, a tangible anchor in a moment that felt suspended between dream and reality. He poured the dark liquid into his tin cup, the familiar ritual giving him time to organize thoughts that seemed to tumble over each other like rocks in an avalanche. "In all my years," he said finally, his voice carrying across the circle with a gravity that matched the moment, "I never imagined that anyone would see value in what I've become. I came to these mountains a broken man, chasing fool's gold and running from failures that seemed to follow me like shadows. But you speak of me as if I were something more than the sum of my mistakes." The woman who had first spoken, and who seemed to be the leader of this remarkable group, nodded slowly, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight with an intensity that spoke of deep conviction. "We see what you have survived, Samuel Hartwell. We see a man who has learned to live where others would die, who has faced the wilderness alone and emerged stronger for it. These are not the qualities of a broken man. These are the qualities of a warrior who has been tested by life itself and found worthy." Her words struck something deep within Sam's chest, a chord that had been silent for so long he had forgotten it existed. He thought of the years that had led him to this place, the failed business ventures, the woman who had chosen security over adventure, the friends who had given up on dreams while he had stubbornly pursued them into increasingly remote and dangerous territory. All of it had seemed like evidence of his inadequacy, proof that he was destined to end his days alone and forgotten. But these women saw a different story when they looked at him. They saw resilience where he saw stubbornness, wisdom where he saw failure, strength where he saw the accumulated scars of a life lived without compromise. Their perspective was like a lens that brought his own life into focus in ways he had never considered, revealing patterns and purposes that had been hidden beneath layers of self-doubt and regret. "You speak of watching me," Sam said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee that had been his companion through countless lonely nights. "How long have you been out there in the darkness, studying this old fool as he talks to his fire and argues with the rocks?" A younger woman, perhaps 18 years old, with braids that fell past her shoulders, spoke for the first time. Her voice was softer than her leader's, but no less certain. "3 moons we have watched, taking turns, so that you were never truly alone, even when you believed yourself to be. We have seen you track wounded animals not to kill them, but to end their suffering with a clean shot. We have seen you share your food with the ravens and the chipmunks, speaking to them as if they were old friends. We have seen you work your claim with a patience that speaks of deep understanding of the earth's rhythms." Sam felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck as he realized that his most private moments, his conversations with the wildlife and his gentle treatment of the creatures that shared his mountain home, had been witnessed by these observant women. He had always been careful around other people, maintaining the gruff exterior that men were expected to wear in the rough world of mining camps and frontier towns. But alone in the wilderness, he had allowed his gentler nature to emerge, never imagining that anyone was watching. "You have seen me at my most foolish then," he said with a self-deprecating chuckle, talking to squirrels and ravens as if they might answer back, treating them like the family I never had. "We have seen you at your most human," the leader corrected gently, "and that humanity, combined with your skills and your strength, is exactly what we hope to pass on to our children. A warrior who kills only when necessary, who shows kindness to the small and helpless, who understands that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction is justified. This is the kind of father we want for our sons and daughters." The fire popped and hissed as a pocket of sap in one of the logs released its moisture in a small explosion of steam and sparks. The sound seemed to punctuate the woman's words, adding emphasis to a statement that reframed everything Sam thought he knew about strength and masculinity. In the world he had come from, men were valued for their ability to dominate, to take what they wanted through force or cunning. But these women were describing a different kind of strength entirely, one that encompassed compassion and restraint as well as skill and courage. "There is something else you should know," another of the women said, her voice carrying a note of solemnity that made Sam look up from his coffee cup. She was perhaps 20 years old, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "We do not make this request lightly, nor do we make it only of you. Our medicine woman has had visions, dreams that showed her a man with silver in his beard and scars on his hands, a man who would father children, destined to bridge 2 worlds. Sam's hand instinctively moved to his beard, feeling the coarse silver hairs that had replaced the brown of his youth. The scars on his hands were numerous, some from mining accidents, others from the countless small injuries that accumulated over a lifetime of working with tools and weapons. That these details had appeared in someone's vision before they had ever met him sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Visions," he repeated slowly, the word feeling strange on his tongue. "I'm not a man who puts much stock in such things, but I've lived long enough to know that there are mysteries in this world that can't be explained by logic alone." The leader smiled at his words, and Sam caught a glimpse of the young woman beneath the serious exterior she had maintained throughout their conversation. Wisdom often begins with the admission that we do not know everything. Our medicine woman's visions have guided our people for many years, and they have never led us astray. When she described the man we were to seek, every detail matched what we found when we finally located your camp. The implications of her words settled over Sam like a heavy blanket. If these women's medicine woman had indeed seen him in visions before they had ever met, then this encounter was not the random chance he had assumed it to be. Instead, it was something that had been ordained by forces beyond his understanding, a convergence of destinies that had been set in motion long before he had ever set foot in these mountains. "And what did these visions tell you about the children we might create together?" Sam asked, surprised by his own boldness in speaking of such intimate matters with women he had just met. But the extraordinary circumstances seemed to call for extraordinary directness, and he found himself caught up in the gravity of the moment. The youngest of the women, who had remained silent until now, spoke up with a voice that carried the clear tones of youth, but the weight of ancient knowledge. The visions showed children who would be skilled with weapons, but wise in their use, who would understand both the ways of the white man and the traditions of our people. They will be bridges between worlds that too often see each other as enemies, healers of divisions that have caused too much pain and bloodshed. Sam felt the weight of prophecy settling on his shoulders like a mantle he had never asked to wear. The idea that his children he had never expected to have at his age, might play a role in healing the wounds between cultures was both humbling and terrifying. He had seen enough of the violence and misunderstanding between white settlers and native peoples to know how desperately such bridges were needed, but he had never imagined that he might play a part in building them. The fire burned lower as they continued to talk, and Sam found himself drawn deeper into their world of visions and prophecies, of traditions that stretched back through generations of wisdom and experience. These women were not asking him to abandon his own culture or beliefs, but rather to contribute to something larger than either of their individual traditions, a future where the best of both worlds might be combined in the next generation. As the night deepened around them, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Sam began to understand that this moment represented more than just an unexpected encounter in the wilderness. It was a crossroads, a point where the paths of destiny converged in ways that would echo through generations yet unborn. The choice he made here, in this circle of firelight surrounded by 8 remarkable women, would ripple forward through time in ways he could barely begin to comprehend. The mountains stood silent witness to this extraordinary conversation, their ancient peaks holding secrets that spanned millennia of human hopes and dreams. In this remote place, far from the noise and confusion of civilization, something profound was taking shape. A union of cultures and bloodlines that might indeed produce the bridges the world so desperately needed. Sam set down his empty coffee cup and looked around the circle one more time, seeing in each face a reflection of hope and determination that humbled him. These women had traveled far and risked much to find him, guided by visions and dreams that had led them to this moment of possibility. The least he could do was honor their courage with his own. The silence stretched between them, pregnant with possibility and weighted with the gravity of decisions that would shape the future. In that moment, suspended between his solitary past and an uncertain but no longer lonely future, Sam Hartwell prepared to step across the threshold into a destiny he had never imagined but was beginning to understand he had been preparing for his entire life. The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow, the weight of destiny and prophecy settling into his bones with a finality that took his breath away. He had come to these mountains seeking gold, but instead he had found something far more precious, a purpose that transcended his own small dreams and connected him to something vast and eternal. The fire crackled between them, its light dancing across faces that had become familiar in the space of a single extraordinary night, and Sam realized that his life had just taken a turn that would change everything. "The visions," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, Did they show you what would happen if I refused? Did they show you what would happen if I accepted? The medicine woman's daughter, for that was who the youngest woman had revealed herself to be, closed her eyes for a moment, as if consulting some inner vision that only she could see. When she opened them again, they held depths that seemed far older than her 18 years. The visions showed two paths, she said, her voice carrying the weight of prophecy. In one, you remain alone in these mountains until the snows claim you, and the children who might have bridged two worlds are never born. In the other, you become the father of a new generation, and your bloodline carries forward the skills and wisdom that will be needed in the difficult times ahead. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The idea that his decision in this moment might affect not just his own future, but the future of generations yet unborn, was almost too much to comprehend. He thought of all the years he had spent alone, all the nights he had stared into the fire, and wondered if his life had any meaning beyond the gold he scratched from the rocks. "And what of you?" he asked, looking around the circle at these 8 remarkable women. "What do the visions say about your futures? What happens to you after the children are born?" The leader smiled, and for the first time since they had appeared at his fire, Sam saw something that looked like genuine joy in her expression. "We return to our people as mothers of warriors, as women who have fulfilled a sacred duty to our tribe and to the future. Our children will be raised with love and wisdom, taught the skills of both their parents' peoples, prepared for a world that will need their unique gifts." "But they will know their father," another woman added quickly, as if sensing Sam's unspoken concern. "They will not be raised as strangers to your blood or your ways. You will have a place among us for as long as you wish it, a voice in their upbringing, a role in shaping the men and women they will become." The offer was more generous than Sam had dared to hope, more complete than anything he had ever imagined possible. These women were not asking him to simply provide genetic material for their children. They were inviting him to become part of their community, to take on the full responsibilities and privileges of fatherhood in a culture that valued family above all else. Sam stood slowly, his joints protesting after sitting cross-legged for so long, and walked to the edge of the firelight. The darkness beyond seemed infinite, stretching away toward horizons he could not see, filled with possibilities he was only beginning to understand. Behind him, he could feel the weight of 8 pairs of eyes watching, waiting for his decision with a patience that spoke of deep faith in the rightness of their cause. The wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying with it the scent of snow from the higher peaks and the promise of winter's approach. Soon these mountains would be locked in ice and snow, impassable to all but the most determined travelers. If he was going to make this choice, it would have to be soon. There would be no opportunity for second thoughts once the snows began to fall. "I have lived my entire life as a man apart," Sam said finally, his voice carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. "I have chased dreams that led me away from family, from community, from everything that most men hold dear. I told myself it was because I was seeking something greater, something more meaningful than the ordinary life that seemed to satisfy others." He turned back to face the circle, seeing in the firelight the faces of women who had traveled far to offer him something he had never dared to dream of, the chance to matter, to contribute something lasting to the world, to leave a legacy that would outlive any gold he might pull from the earth. "Perhaps," he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "perhaps I was being prepared for this moment all along. Perhaps every choice that led me away from the conventional path was actually leading me toward this place, this night, this opportunity to become something more than I ever imagined possible." The leader rose gracefully to her feet, her movement fluid and purposeful. "Then you will help us? You will become the father of our children, the bridge between our worlds?" Sam looked around the circle one more time, seeing in each face a reflection of hope and determination that humbled him. These women had risked everything to find him, had traveled into dangerous territory, based on nothing more than visions and faith. Their courage deserved to be met with courage of his own. "Yes," he said simply, the word carrying the weight of destiny and the promise of a future he was only beginning to understand. "Yes, I will help you. I will become the father you seek for your children, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that they grow up to be the bridges between worlds that your visions have shown." The silence that followed his words was profound, filled with the weight of a decision that would echo through generations. Then one by one, the women began to smile, their faces lighting up with joy and relief that transformed them from mysterious figures in the darkness into real people with hopes and dreams and fears, just like his own. The fire crackled and danced between them, its light seeming brighter now, as if it too understood the significance of what had just transpired. In this remote place, far from the noise and confusion of civilization, something extraordinary had been set in motion, a union of cultures and bloodlines that would indeed produce the bridges the world so desperately needed. As the night deepened around them and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Sam Hartwell felt the weight of his old life falling away like a discarded coat. The lonely prospector who had talked to his fire and argued with the rocks was gone, replaced by a man with purpose, with responsibility, with a future that stretched far beyond his own brief span of years. The mountains stood silent, witness to this transformation, their ancient peaks holding secrets that spanned millennia of human hopes and dreams. In this moment, suspended between past and future, Sam understood that he had found something far more valuable than any gold hidden in the earth. He had found his destiny, and it was more beautiful and terrible and wonderful than anything he had ever dared to imagine. The 8 Apache women gathered closer around the fire, their earlier formality giving way to something warmer and more intimate as the weight of decision lifted from all their shoulders. The night was still young, and there was much to discuss, much to plan, much to understand about the future they would build together. But for now, it was enough that the choice had been made, that the path forward was clear, that the visions of the medicine woman would be fulfilled in ways that honored both their traditions and their hopes for generations yet to come.